All right, so we're going to get things kicked off, everyone. I'd like to start by saying thank you all for showing up today for the Florida Summit on Online Science Labs. And we also appreciate your flexibility. We had originally planned for an on-campus visit to bring everyone together in person. And we decided, you know what, with going with Online Science Labs, it's probably good to pivot to something online, right? Especially during this time with people traveling for the holidays and whatnot. So we appreciate everyone's flexibility today. So a couple things I want to cover before we jump right in here. So we do want this to be as interactive as possible. We've set this up to kind of be a casual virtual environment. So we want everyone to turn their cameras on if possible. Feel free to interrupt with questions or comments or feedback as we go through. We really want this to be, very discussion based. So, and then there's gonna be a lot of opportunity if you'd like on the way through for questions and discussion. So we are going to pause a couple times throughout. But again, as I want to reiterate, feel free to pepper in any of those questions or thoughts in the chat or chime in by just raising your hand, unmuting at any point. So we are going to record this and we are going to share this as soon as we get done here. It takes a little bit for things to buffer, but then we'll go ahead and send this out for any of you that like to review anything or maybe you didn't catch something. We'll go ahead and make sure to send that out to everyone that registered and attended for today. Lastly, I would say let's not forget about using those DoorDash vouchers. I don't know if you guys checked, should have arrived in your emails. You did get a DoorDash voucher from us, so be sure to use that to enjoy lunch on us today. That's just a little treat from us to you, and hopefully it makes for a good, engaging environment today. So, and then as we're kicking off here, there's going to be a couple of there's going to be 2 short poll questions. I'd appreciate if everyone can chime in on those polls. We're going to get those pulled up right now, and then we'll just give you a few minutes to put some answers in for those. Okay. So the poll should be up now. Feel free to, it should just be some multiple choice questions. So feel free to get those answered here, and then we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. So. All right, so it looks like we've got quite a few, if not all the answers in so far from all the participants. So we're going to go ahead and move on now. All right, so today's agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about the latest research on online labs, some of the things that are at the forefront of what's going on in the online lab world. We're going to have sort of a discussion about overcoming common challenges with some of the online labs, and then hopefully we get a lot of feedback and some questions that we can kind of go back and forth on. And then we're also going to have a discussion on some of the key strategies for delivering, these online labs effectively, how we're going about that, some of the different modalities, things like that. And then we're going to wrap up with pretty much an open Q&A. Again, this whole thing is supposed to be very discussion oriented, very casual. So there's just going to be a lot of points really to get everybody involved, right? And so with that in mind, I'm going to I'd like Chris, Dwayne, and then if you guys can introduce yourselves, and then I'll wrap up with my introduction.
Okay, I'll go first. So I am Dr. Chris Liu. I am a faculty member at Hillsborough Community College in Tampa, Florida at the Down Mabry campus. I teach chemistry, and I currently teach some online chemistry laboratory classes that involve this hands-on approach. And so I'm here to provide a little insight on how I started using this hands-on approach to teach online laboratory classes.
Thanks, Chris. My name's Dwayne Cagle. I am the senior scientist at Science Interactive, where I've worked for the past 12 years. And with my team of other PhD scientists and instructional designers, we work to develop not only engaging curriculum for both hands-on and virtual lab experiences for students, But we also work very closely with our procurement department and our kitting side of the business to ensure that the materials that they are shipping to students are appropriate science grade materials and that they function as designed in the curriculum that we develop.
Thanks, Chris and Dwayne. So my name is Taylor Lewillier. I am a senior account executive with Science Interactive. I've been here for 5 years. I've worked very closely with, of course, Dwayne internally and then Chris externally over the last few years. We've supplied a lot of chemistry labs for Chris, as well as many of the colleagues there at Hillsborough Community College, and I've been in the Southeast Territory, which encompasses Florida, of course, for the entirety of my career here at Science Interactive. So.
All right. Well, the first part of our discussion today is going to be presenting the results of our latest research, which was a comprehensive survey conducted with not only students, but also educators across the country that teach science courses online. So the next slide, please, Taylor. So what this report and research study encompassed was surveying over 1,600 students and instructors. And that breaks out to roughly 1,300 students, and then the balance being on the instructor side. Of the students that responded in the survey, approximately 92% of them were currently taking a science course online or had taken one in the past year. And about half of them identified as science majors. Now, we also broke it down into what disciplines the students were responding as having taken courses for online. And you'll see the breakout there is weighed a little more heavily towards biology and chemistry, but also a fair amount of anatomy, physiology, and microbiology courses. And when I saw this, it really didn't surprise me. For having been in this industry for the past dozen years, 12 years ago, the predominant programs that were taught online that utilize science courses were allied health programs. And so it's not surprising that even today, those still account for the majority of student responses, i.e. anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, and micro. Similarly, for the instructor demographics, those were the primary courses taught by all of the instructors that we surveyed. Of those educators, approximately 78% of them identified as either adjunct or tenured instructors, and about 9% of them identified as also having administrative duties at their respective institutions. And those instructors were really split equally between majors, non-majors, or teaching both types of focused courses. Next slide, please.
Sure. Dwayne, I'd like to pause for just 1 second. I think this would be a good point if everyone want to unmute, or if you're comfortable, you can put in the chat as well. Just let us know what discipline that you're teaching, and that way we can kind of get an idea of who we've got here today. So feel free, if anyone would like to unmute, let us know.
I teach chemistry exclusively.
Thanks, David. Anyone else like to chime in?
Well, in the chat, Taylor, I'm seeing biology, chemistry, physics, biochem, and pharmacology. So a little bit of a lot of different topics. So
awesome.
It's
good
that we're seeing some that are outside the allied health field, because that's where we've really seen the growth in online science education in the past 5 or 6 years. So more of those gen ed, more foundational STEM type science course labs. Oh, awesome. And there's a microbiology, one of my favorite
there we go.
topics. So, okay. Thank you, Taylor, for taking that pause. It's great to get that feedback. All right. So we asked one important question one important question to both students and educators, and that was, should science labs be offered in an online format? Overwhelmingly on the student side, 91% of students said it was very important for them to be able to take a science course or multiple science courses online. On the instructor side of things, 78% of instructors were satisfied with their online teaching experience, and 81% of students were satisfied with their experience of taking a science course online. I wanted to stop right now and just ask a question to our audience today. Just a very basic one. Is your institution currently offering any science laboratory courses online?
Hi, this is David. I teach with Chris at Hillsborough Community College. I teach at a different campus, but we offer a wide variety of biology, microbiology, chemistry up to a certain point of online labs, without a doubt. Yeah. The
Great.
numbers growing, obviously.
Which campus are you on, David?
I teach at the Brandon campus.
Okay, got it. All right,
So
looks
we
like
are
there's a
getting
few
some
folks
comments
chiming in the
coming through
chat.
in the chat, and it seems like a lot of people have some level of offerings online. While it may not be a complete program, or it may only be a select semester or teaching terms in a 12-month cycle, or only for non-majors versus majors. But it's good to see that in most of the institutions that people are attending from today, there is some level of online course offerings. All right, next slide, Taylor. So then we wanted to ask questions to the survey participants about what their concerns were regarding offering science laboratory courses online. And predominantly those responses were focused around quality and cost as being the two primary barriers. So if we wanted to break down the challenges, 41% of instructors said recreating a hands-on experience was the biggest challenge that they had when offering a course online. Meaning, how do you replicate a lot of the things we have traditionally done in face-to-face laboratories? So 26% of instructors said the quality and rigor of the course materials was their biggest challenge. So maybe they had kind of figured out that, oh, we can do this online, but then the materials our students are using or the types of procedures they're able to perform really just aren't up to the standards we would like to see them. And then last but certainly not least, cost is a top reason that instructors were hesitant to consider hands-on labs for their online courses. And certainly when we look at providing students with laboratory grade materials such as laboratory glassware and other tools and implements students would typically use in a face-to-face environment, obviously there's a cost involved with that, so not surprising. So those are the challenges. What are the realities of the experience? Well, 71% of instructors said that when using hands-on lab exercises for students, that the overall experience was comparable to an in-person face-to-face experience. And students mirrored that. Indeed, 74% of students came to that conclusion. 89% of instructors using hands-on lab said that their students had an opportunity to learn the skills that were required by the objectives of their course. And again, 84% of the students felt likewise. And then lastly, about 3/4 of students, 72%, said that the cost associated with the materials that they use to conduct remote hands-on procedures was aligned with the value that they felt they received for that experience. So that's what our respondents in the survey concluded. I'm just curious, what have been your biggest challenges when either designing your courses or actually teaching them online? And how do those challenges relate to what we found in our study?
Oh, I'm going to chime in for 1 minute
Yeah,
and
Chris.
sort of help facilitate this discussion a little bit. So I have had students come and tell me in person, or not in person, but sort of talk to me at the beginning of class, and they are concerned about the cost of a laboratory kit up front. But then when they actually see the laboratory kit, they realize that this is giving them the same experience and they do not have to drive to campus. So they are getting a similar experience without the commute to campus from their own home. And they understand that that is reflected in the cost and it is all in a good alignment.
Chris, did you have any specific challenges back during like COVID, for example? I know that was a pretty hard time for just about everyone as things were ramping up.
Yes, the problem in COVID was we had to have every lab basically online for about a summer and about half a semester. So that really posed some challenges. The good part was I was already in the process of moving or developing some online classes to fulfill some of the needs here at the college. So I already had the background, so it was a little bit easier for me to sort of transition to the online. The problem being that you could not expect students who were going to take a face-to-face class necessarily to have to go out, and now, there's an additional cost associated with buying a kit or something because of the COVID. That was the struggle sort of during that period.
What was your findings, I guess, coming out of that? Did you find that students tended to still enroll in those online courses, or did folks
Yeah,
try and go
so
back to
when the
face-to-face?
courses were online only because of COVID, or we had half the number that we could normally have in the face-to-face. So during the pandemic, rather than 24 students, I think we capped the face-to-face lab to about 12 students so we could have better social distancing. Yes, they were still online in quite a big number. And it was actually a slow process to get the face-to-face labs coming back. So right now on our particular campus at Down Mabry, we do not have the same number of students actually enrolled in face-to-face labs, and the number of face-to-face labs has reduced quite a bit since COVID-19. Yes, the number of online labs has also reduced. Why? Because we don't need to require students to go online. We can offer them the option now, but we still have some more sections of online labs than we did prior to the start of COVID.
So we've had a comment in chat, Taylor, because I know that you may not be able to see these comments. One of the bigger concerns and challenges have been that the students taking the online laboratory courses don't have some of the skills that are really requisite for when they get back to campus and take a progression course that expects them to have those skills. So I replied in the chat that if they could share like a specific skill that students have been lacking from an online course, I think that would be good to share with the audience today. I mean, I can, in my own mind, I can think of some examples, but I would like to hear if there was a specific example at your particular institution or in your program based on how the course is taught.
This is David. I teach mostly organic chemistry on campus. I teach the lectures in a hybrid format, and labs are exclusively on campus. One of the things that I've noticed, since COVID and since students have, by and large, been taking online labs, just manipulation with a balance. You know what I mean? Understanding what it means to tear a balance and understanding, the concept of putting a substance into, say, some type of weighing vessel and parsing out, what mass pertains to the weighing vessel and what mass pertains to the substance that you're trying to actually mass out. That's been one of the most glaring things to me, I think.
Yeah, and so the clarification I just received from chat says, skills related to specific types of laboratory equipment. And so not unlike what you just shared, David, this goes into things, again, an analytic balance, pipettes, complex glassware, aseptic technique, etc. And I think that is a challenge. We'll talk a little bit about it in some upcoming slides. I think that's certainly a challenge when we start talking about virtual labs, which there's certainly a demand for and a need for in certain situations. But I think I would argue, being kind of a more traditional type of educator, at least in my history, that hard to practice doing some pretty basic lab techniques in a virtual only environment. So
If I can chime in for a minute. So when students are working in a face-to-face laboratory, sometimes they're working with pairs, or they're working with a partner in the lab. So I don't really can always tell what a student A might know versus what a student B might know because they're working as a partner. So I always find that even students who have come through the ranks doing hands-on labs on campus can still have some problems, let's say when it comes to reading a burette by the time they get to general chemistry 2. Even though they've read a burette many times in general chemistry 1, in the face-to-face laboratory, they still can't seem to read a burette correctly. So not all of the skills that I think students are lacking going up the rank is completely due to the online. Yes, there are a lot more that they might be lacking if they had a simulation-based online lab, but there are still some that are going to be lacking regardless, because it's the student's initiative whether they want to fully engage in prior laboratory experiences.
Great.
For you folks in the chat, Christina and Laura, were these simulations, were these hands-on? Can you share with us kind of the details of how these labs were given to the students?
I can chime in. I mean, most of our experience at St. Leo has, came out of the pandemic. We've really struggled to feel confident about building online labs to use post-pandemic, but we know that there's a need to do so. We have used a combination of kits that we built and would distribute mail to the students. And we did use quite a number of simulations. So when I say the students seemed not to have the skills, this was like when they came back to campus, when campus finally opened up, and then they matriculated into the next chemistry course or the next AMP course or micro or whatever. They had no idea what they were doing. Now, granted, they were working online for the first time in these scenarios. It was a stressful time in their lives for all of us. And so maybe the context played a big role there. But that seems to be the biggest hesitation, is if the students are doing something online and that completion of that course implies that they're ready for the next course in the sequence, are they really ready for the next course in the sequence? And we want to know how to make them ready using an online format.
Hi, good afternoon. Same thing. Our labs were all in person, and due to the pandemic, we had to scramble and create some content for online education. And what we did with microbiology was that we basically did the experiments and we recorded them with our phones. Edited them, and had the students at home look at the results and things like that, try to make it as realistic as possible for them. The same thing with certain things that we did for A&P, like for example the digestion experiments. So I literally did the experiments for digestion, carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins, filmed it, showed the test tubes, and they had to record and their observations at home. EKG, I think I did one on myself and sent them the EKG readings and things like that. So, I mean, we were able to do it. And I think, frankly, it was pretty good considering the circumstances. But I do have to say that we went back in person. But, I keep hearing this need for maybe creating also online labs, so to give other people opportunity to take the labs. And now there are companies that are making remote kits for certain things. So, maybe now it's before I was like, no, in person. Now I'm here today just to hear what you all have to say and give it a serious consideration. Even if it's hybrid. But yeah, just wanted to hear everyone's opinion and experiences. So thank you.
You're muted, Dwayne.
That was some excellent feedback, everyone. Certainly much appreciated. I think for time's sake, we'll go on to the next slide right now, Taylor, if you don't mind. Okay, and so we just touched a little bit on virtual simulations versus hands-on equipment. So this next slide really addresses that in more detail. And when we asked the question to our participants regarding these two modalities of delivering online laboratories, 84% of instructors said they preferred their students to do hands-on procedures, not surprisingly. But many of those individuals chose some number of virtual simulations due to a cost and convenience standpoint. So the overall formats that we found that instructors were implementing within their courses and programs for virtual only offerings, only about 15% or so. So certainly not the majority of online lab courses. For exclusive hands-on only labs, that was higher, approaching 30%, but again, still not really the majority. It seemed like the majority was indeed a mix of both virtual and virtual experiments, simulations, and hands-on equipment labs done at home. And so then we asked the question, well, what was the main motivators for choosing the virtual lab format when instructors had already said they preferred the hands-on? And you can see how that breaks out here with really three major categories. One, some schools would not permit students to do hands-on experiment type procedures off campus. Two, cost. We've already talked about that. And then also ease of implementation, meaning predominantly that these virtual experiences could be integrated into the existing course shells and it was seamless for the student. So those were interesting findings. Same thing, a question up for discussion, what factors do you think either, or have you found yourself, or either, what do you think about instructors at your institution would be most concerned with in selecting which type of format for an online lab? Do you feel that these statistics that we presented represent the mindset at your particular institution?
So I don't do online labs personally. I teach a chemistry and society course that the closest I come to any type of virtual lab instruction are, throughout the semester, we'll do a couple of, lab type things where it's more me providing them with data and they do calculations and data analysis, not so much working with chemicals or glassware or anything like that. But I'm guessing, from speaking with colleagues at HCC, I think probably most are concerned with the quality of the experience that the students are getting, from the online lab, that they're taking. I think that would probably be the biggest factor.
And then we had someone in chat, their categories were perceived quality, so very similar, rigor, and lastly, ease of implementation. All right, Taylor, you want to move us to the next slide, please? So it's still talking a little bit about the virtual offerings inside of things. There are benefits, obviously, to virtual simulations. But again, both instructors and students agreed they fall a little short of a more traditional hands-on learning experience. The benefits specifically to the virtual offerings is that in many instances, students are able to observe what would otherwise be unobservable by traditional means. Again, we talked about cost. It can certainly balance the overall cost that students or institutions are spending for students to complete laboratory activities remotely. It can supplement the experience for the student, meaning it's repeatable. If remote students are conducting hands-on procedures, more often than not, they only have a finite amount of materials to work with. So they may only be able to repeat that given procedure twice at most. Whereas in a virtual environment, they can repeat it as many times as needed. Provides a low stake environment for learning. So again, students not afraid of ruining something if they mess up and then not being able to repeat and do it again to get it right. And lastly, to support different learning styles. And I would say in conjunction with that, perhaps add some level of accessibility to traditional hands-on procedures that would really require a hands-on student to have an assistant right there by their side, because there's no way to integrate that accessibility within those procedures, whereas in a digital environment that can be accommodated. So in conclusion, we're just talking about virtual simulations. 82% of instructors using virtual simulations believe students would have learned more with a hands-on experience. And there we go. And 74% of students who completed virtual simulations said that they would have learned more with a hands-on experience at home. So I was already watching the time. I think we're going to cut some of these discussions at the bottom of these slides a little short, because I want us to get through this. And most importantly, I want us to get to Chris's portion of today's slides, because I think it's invaluable what he has to share about firsthand experience of teaching in science courses online for a number of years now. So can we get the next slide, please, Taylor? Lastly, students and instructors differed on their views of how lab formats compared to in-person experience. Students tended to agree that virtual experiences were comparable to in-person face-to-face lab experiences. Again, we've already seen the instructors disagree with that. Whereas both instructors and students agreed that remote hands-on procedures did a much better job of mirroring and being comparable to what they would have done in a campus lab. Can we have the next slide, please? So the key takeaways of the annual report: online learning, it's here to stay. There's a lot of demand for it. And certainly it's time we all embraced this within STEM-related disciplines. So no longer just allied health, like it has been historically the case, but in all disciplines, such as physics, geology, pharmacy, technology, things such as that. Lab courses can be delivered effectively online with a level of quality and rigor that aligns with its students' experience in a non-campus lab, if done properly. Incorporating hands-on component is key to ensuring the quality of providing lab experience comparable to that of the in-person experience. And while there are risks to students learning when relying solely on virtual simulations, they can be an effective tool and beneficial for students when paired with hands-on procedures. And lastly, as institutions expand online courses and programs, they should provide both students and instructors with support and resources they need to deliver courses effectively. Next slide, please. This is not an advertisement, but just a little bit of sharing information about what Science Interactive Company has to offer for online science courses. One, we do provide real science grade equipment and materials for hands-on labs to be completed by remote online students. We do not ship toys or cheap imitation materials in kits. They are all science grade materials and chemicals where appropriate. Our courses that go along with the physical kits are all Quality Matters certified. So very, very important. We know when institutions are bringing a course online that many are required to submit for a Quality Matters certification. Well, we're always there to assure you that the lab manual for your course will have already been Quality Matters certified. And then lastly, we deliver the curricular content to students on a cloud-based digital platform that can be integrated into your existing learning management system. Next slide, please. We offer a library of over 450 experiments that include a mix of both hands-on procedures and digital virtual simulations. Again, we use lab-grade material. We give you the flexibility to choose which experiments you would like to be the digital format and which you would like to be a hands-on. Now, not every experiment in our 450 experiment library has a digital and a hands-on counterpart, but many of them do. And then we handle all the logistics. We offer hassle-free delivery right to your students or to your bookstore, or both, whichever your situation dictates. Our curriculum is developed by PhD scientists such as myself and my team of others there at Science Interactive. All of our curriculum goes through a strict review process, not only being certified by Quality Matters, but also being both internally reviewed in the form of peer reviews and externally reviewed in the form of Curriculum Advisory Board, which are current online educators and on-campus educators. And then lastly, we spoke on it a little bit already, but we do house all of this curriculum in a cloud-based platform. We have a very distinct pedagogy that has proven to be successful. And Chris will talk a little bit about that in just a second. We offer seamless grading that once again integrates with the grade book of your learning management system to give students really a one-click entry into not only your learning management system, but also their digital lab manual for their hands-on procedures. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Chris. It's just really the best part of today's presentation. Please, Chris, take it away.
Okay, thank you. You can move on to the next slide because I sort of already introduced myself. And in the interest of time, I'll go a little bit quick through these first couple of slides because I already sort of talked about how I got into teaching online laboratory classes here at Hillsborough Community College. But I will start by here at the Down Mabry campus. For many years, we had these hybrid classes. And I mean a hybrid sort of lecture class where students would go to lecture one day a week, and then the other day of the week they would spend doing watching videos, doing problem sets, etc. at home. When we had these hybrid lectures, the laboratory classes were all face-to-face. So the one day they came to class for lecture, they would also take the 2.5-hour, 3-hour lab class on that particular day. On the Down Mabry campus, those hybrid classes have gone by the wayside for chemistry because we found it was a little bit struggle for the students. They did not perform as well as if they were in a completely face-to-face environment. So with hybrid sort of out of the picture, we started with our introductory chemistry classes, and we started having, with better success, fully online lectures. And when the students took a fully asynchronous online lecture, unfortunately, they were still required to come to campus one day a week in order to complete the laboratory portion of the class. So that limits who can actually sign up and take these particular courses, because you're taking an asynchronous course for lecture, but now you have to be in a geographical area that you are close enough to drive to campus one day a week for the lab. And maybe you're taking an asynchronous class because you are traveling for work and you don't have, let's say, a 3-hour window at a set time each week that you could come to campus. So starting at the introductory chemistry level, we wanted to develop a way for students taking an asynchronous class online to be able to complete the laboratory component. So you heard a little bit in the chat earlier from my colleague, David Flanagan over at HCC in the Brandon campus. So I have another colleague over there named Beth. I believe she started with the online lab for intro chemistry a little bit before me. But anyway, I wanted students who were taking a completely asynchronous online chemistry lecture course to have the same experience they would have in the face-to-face lab, but online from their home. So since COVID-19, we have expanded a little bit in our offerings. So we now teach introductory chemistry fully online with a kit hands-on based laboratory experience. We teach a allied health, a general organic and biological chemistry completely online with a hands-on laboratory experience. We also are now starting to teach general chemistry 1 fully online with a hands-on laboratory experience as well. So I believe we have, for the lower level, I think the GOB, we have about 2 sections on my campus. We may have about 2 on Brandon, and then we have 1 or 2 on each campus of the intro and the general chemistry 1 as well. Okay, you can move on to the next slide. Okay, so one of the things we didn't really talk too much about is as time seems to progress, you seem to get these attorneys, and they're always what? Their goal is to make money. So my uncle was trying to tell me the other day in a casual conversation that I believe he said something like, if an attorney settles out of court, he gets about a 40% of the settlement, and it's about 50% or something if it's settled actually in a trial case. But there are these attorneys that are always trying to find ways, to sue over the littlest of things. So one of the things that I want to emphasize is the way the agreements are worked out for an online laboratory class involving these laboratory kits. It did not provide any more additional liability to the college or to myself as the instructor or to the students. So it took quite a bit of time to work out with the college council and a particular vendor so that we could come up with an agreement so that there was no additional liability placed on everyone. Okay. So class materials also have to be, I'm sort of saying this backwards. So now in the state of Florida, if you teach an online class, it can be listed in a state database as either high quality or not high quality. And I know our college and probably most other colleges where you are from want all of your courses to be listed as high quality. And I would also really wanted students do exactly what they're doing at the face-to-face laboratory, but do that at home. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this I'm going to talk to you a few minutes about some of the benefits of what I perceive of hands-on labs versus some of the benefits of the virtual labs. So I like these hands-on labs at home. They provide a similar experience. So I've had students who are, like I said earlier, didn't really like the fact that they had to buy this particular laboratory kit and thought it was expensive. Why not be able to do something a little bit cheaper with just computer-based simulations? And some of them even posted in a discussion I had at the beginning of the semester, why not have this a simulation course? But I would say, unscientifically, that probably most of the students realized by the end of the semester that this course developed with laboratory kits gave them a similar experience to what they would have had in the face-to-face class. Okay, what else? So this also gives them allows them to go into the real world with some skills that they may not have. Because in most simulations, you can't really use a burette properly or a pipette properly. You can sort of simulate that, but there is no liability or responsibility if something went astray. Like you can't actually break an expensive piece of glassware, or you can't spill a chemical that now has to be cleaned up. So these online labs that are not simulation based, they are hands-on based. It allows students they're actually doing something, and they're taking ownership of what they are doing at home. Now, why might I like a virtual lab? So like we were saying before, during the pandemic, we really had no option. You can't suspend learning for a year or two when students are unable to come to class. So under certain circumstances, virtual labs are possible and they may be a viable option. You can also use virtual labs. I know some instructors will use a virtual lab as a pre-lab assignment. So you can still have a face-to-face lab, but if a student ran through a virtual lab before they went to the face-to-face lab as sort of a pre-lab, then that might help them be better prepared, more focused when they come to the actual course. And what I believe Dwayne was saying earlier was, if we don't want a course that is quite as expensive. I have not done this yet, but I am thinking you could remove some of the labs that are hands-on, that don't require as many of the laboratory skills, and reduce the cost by making a little virtual exercise to replace them. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to go over for just, I don't know what let me look at the clock. So I got to hurry up. We're almost out of time. Anyway, we can basically you can read this particular slide. What I want to spend really the next 5 minutes or so I have left, so we can get to a little discussion at the end, is show you in a little bit more detail the laboratory platform where students are actually going to perform the experiments. Okay, so you can move on. We'll skip this slide. Okay, so I'm going to take my class, Chemistry for Health Sciences, that I teach completely online, lecture and laboratory, and show you how a typical lesson would work in the online lab environment. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we're going to start. This is a laboratory techniques and measurements. So if any of you have gone through training on has anybody gone through training on high quality online classes? If you want to, you can let me know in the chat. So there is a term that always comes up, starts with a B. Anybody know what that term is when considering how to build a online class? So it is Bloom's taxonomy. So following Bloom's taxonomy is a good way to ensure that your online classes are really up to code and are of very high quality. So the platform from Science Interactive follows Bloom's taxonomy. So at the beginning, students have a little pre-lab exercise, which I am showing the introductory screen here. So they go through exploration. So first they get to test their knowledge, see what they already know before they actually start the experiment. And then they'll go through a series of slides and videos so that by the time they finish the exploratory section, they should have all of the skills to successfully manipulate the equipment and perform the hands-on part of the laboratory experiment. And what is actually nice, if you look at the top, I don't have a pointer, but at the top of the screen, it tells you how long the students are expected to spend on each of these. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is the actual experimental section. And at this time, they're actually going to perform a density type of experiment. At the bottom of the screen is a data table. This data table happens to be filled out, but students will get an empty data table just like they would in a face-to-face laboratory environment, and they will be entering their data, doing calculations in these particular data tables where instructors will be able to grade and see just like it would be a laboratory sheet that they get turned in. Okay, next thing I should also add, you can't see this because this is not a live where I can actually interact with my course, but I can customize this course any way I want to. So if I want to add specific instructions for an instructor, students, I can add that in here and tell them any key points. I can add my own videos, so on and so forth. Okay, next slide. We got to hurry up. We're almost out of time here. Okay, at the end, they're going to have a little quiz. So this little quiz, their browser is locked down. So did they take away the key points, what they needed to conceptually learn from the experiment? This is in a multiple choice format. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, the very last thing is what we call a extension question. So one of the key things that I think is lacking, even in my face-to-face science classes, is the application. So I have students who go on to, let's say, a nursing school or to go on to graduate school, and they say what they learned in an undergraduate class was not useful really at all. It seemed like it was not applicable to what they're going to study. So the last thing in these online lab exercises is an exploratory question where it takes everything from the experiment and puts it together in a scenario that can be applicable to the real world. And I have liked how this real world application to all of these components to these labs so much that I am trying to tweak the face-to-face labs so that there's more application in there, because students really like it, and they have told me they really like it when I explain to them what they are doing and learning in the class could be applicable in the real world. So one quick explanation. In my general chemistry 2 class the other day, we're talking about solubility product, and I explained to them how fluoride can help prevent tooth enamel from decaying because it is no longer as soluble, so on and so forth. Okay, I forget. Is there another slide there for me? Or are we come to the end? I think we're gonna give a little summary. So next slide, Taylor. Oh, this is just a quick look at the grade book for students. What students would enter in and instructors could see. We're gonna skip this because we're almost out of time. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is what I learned from starting these online laboratory classes. And I would say, yes, students can learn effectively how to use laboratory equipment at home. And like I was saying earlier with the burette example, people not being able to read a burette correctly, I've had students who have taken online labs versus face-to-face labs. Some students still cannot read equipment correctly. But the amount of students who have difficulty is a lot less when they're actually doing equipment-based labs at home. And, I was concerned about student registration. We get full classes every semester, even though there is an additional cost for the kits. And then, lastly, there's going to be a lot of funny answers students might ask you questions. I say always laugh. Have a good sense of humor when you're grading, because, you can't give students the same type of interaction and give them the same instructions that you would in a face-to-face class. So sometimes you'll get things that are just very ridiculous. Keep an open mind, start to laugh. Okay, I think that wraps up my section. Unfortunately, we're almost out of time for the discussion.
All right, guys. So appreciate you all attending the presentation and whatnot. But what we want to conclude with here, and we'll go a couple minutes over, of course, out of respect for time, if any of you got to hop, no hard feelings at all. So does anyone have anything that they'd like to talk about as far as challenges, how they're overcoming them? Maybe any questions that have came up during the presentation that you didn't have a chance to ask, or just any feedback or comments that you'd like to share with the rest of the group. This would be the time to either unmute and chat with us, or you can post in the chat and we can address them there.
Well, one thing is, go ahead. I was going to say, if anybody wants to follow up with me, you're welcome to email me and I can have a follow-up meeting with you, because I know I went through my part very, very quickly due to time constraints.
Thanks for that, Chris. Those of you that, just because we haven't seen anything pop up yet, those of you that don't know Chris, we've had quite a few challenges over the years, most that we've been able to overcome. So he's a great, not only advocate in a lot of ways, but also someone that's good to reach out to say, okay, how did you deal with this? Or were you able to deal with this, right? Because at the end of the day, there were some things that we simply weren't able to resolve. But I think that Chris is a great person to reach out to, and how getting through the pandemic, how he was able to implement certain things. And as you can see with some of the previous slides, how he was able to bring everything to fruition in the end. So. Chris, I'm not sure if you can see the chat or not. Laura wanted to thank you for sharing your experiences, and she mentioned that she might be following up with you. So.
Oh, thank you, Laura. And yes, you are welcome to follow up with me. I don't know if my email is on there. It's very easy. It's just the word clue, number 2 at the standard HCC. So that's very easy. Yes. And I will get a list of these people who attended too, so I can follow up with some of you too if you have any questions or concerns for me. And you will get an unbiased opinion from a educator, not really trying to push anything. I'm just telling you how I really found and dealt with all of these needs of students in online education.
Thanks, Chris. So again, with respect to everyone's time, I think we'll just go with one or two of these questions. We had a couple that get asked all of the time, right? We do these, we do webinars, we do in-person conferences, we do strategic objectives, all kinds of different meetings, and this is one that comes up a lot. So it's, how do you foster community and collaboration among your online science students? And I think Chris might speak to this, but if anyone would like to post in the chat or unmute and talk about some of the creative ways that they've went about, fostering the community and collaboration, this would be the time.
I will tell you what I do personally. So I follow what is typically done or performed in an online class, which is discussions. And these discussions help foster learning. Now, unfortunately, there are no discussion boards capabilities in the SI Cloud platform, but that is fine. You can use your learning management platform. I think don't get one platform with all the bells and whistles. Make a platform that does one thing very well, which would be taking care of the science experiment. If you ever try to use Canvas, Canvas tries to do all the bells and whistles, and I don't believe it can do one thing very well versus something else in there. So I always give them discussion boards where they get to post and interact with students about the experiment they did the prior week. So after they do the experiment, then they get to discuss their results or what they found with their peers. Does anybody else have any thoughts on this engaging students and collaborating among student-to-student communication in an online environment?
I've had some instructors that I've communicated with over the years, Chris, that would pool student data and then publish it for all the class to use and open up a discussion then for students to compare each individual's data to the pooled data averages and suggest some things that maybe didn't work out perfectly in their experiment when then comparing it to their peers. And also again through a chat board just like you discussed, but it was specific to the data that they had recorded.
Yes, so that is a very interesting. That would be something you could do in an online environment that you really can't do in a face-to-face environment. Is you can have this data and discuss people's data and see which is more plausible. Okay, should we?
Thanks for that, guys. So we're going to go ahead and skip these last few. I know everybody's probably got stuff to do today. All right, so if you had any questions that we couldn't address, you can feel free to scan this with your phone. All this does is basically put a call in my calendar to say, hey, if you want to continue the discussion with me, this gives you an easy avenue to do it versus having to go through some of the traditional methods. In addition to that, registering today, it did qualify you, obviously, in addition to us buying you lunch, for a free sample kit. So for those of you that were maybe just on the cusp of considering some kind of online hands-on solution, this is to get something in your hands, get a tactile set of labs in your hands so that you can take a look and see the quality, the rigor, and then ultimately a one-to-one kit of what your students might receive in the future should we decide to put something together. So again, you can scan this, or I do have a list of those of you that attended today, so I'll shoot an email out shortly after this and see if you guys want to continue the discussion, see if we're a good fit. And if not, if you're not interested, just reply back. I'd rather get a fast no than drag something out. So in addition to that, there's another QR code here. I know that we'd had a couple questions about the annual lab report and wanting to see that. And so you can scan it here. In addition to that, we will be sending that out probably in the same email as the recording for the meeting. So I want to conclude with, again, thank you all for attending today. We appreciate all the interaction. We appreciate everyone unmuting and talking with us and interacting in the chat. And then especially a big thanks for our presenters, Dwayne and Chris. Thank you for sharing your experiences and going through the slides. Everyone was a big help, and we appreciate the participation today. So
Thank you. Appreciate it.
thanks, everyone. Have a great day and have a great weekend.
Yeah, thank you too. Thank you everybody for coming and taking your time out of your busy schedule.